Hey guys, Niffler here and welcome to my channel. During the last week I was trying to create a viable Crit-Facebreaker build, since Rigwald's curse isn't actually that expensive anymore. I mean, it's legacy, but you can pick it up for just 40 chaos in Essence League. And with the steel rings introduced in 2.4, Facebreaker got a major buff in general. So my first attempt was very similar to Mathil, who's also recently uploaded a Crit-Facebreaker Berserker using shieldcharge as a main skill. But I was going Trickster CI instead, because this way I got way higher life pool, can make use of melee damage on full life, and no mana cost for all my skills is pretty sweet. As you can see in the background, it was actually quite fun to play. DPS was 6 times higher than classic RT shieldcharge Slayer, and with the AoE nodes from the Witch and the Templar, you could compensate the missing Ascendancy nodes quite well. Unfortunately, this character suffered from the same problem that made Mathil title his Berserker project a failed build. There is just no way to handle physical reflect. Even with over 10k ES and Volpact, you can still one-shot yourself, and cast damage taken in Mortal Call is not really reliable enough. I mean, you're using Abyssus, which is mandatory not only for its 40 to 60 flat physical damage, but also as you're going crit, Facebreakers now even benefit from the 225 critical strike multiplier. Add the 90% multi from Facebreaker themselves, and the 40% increased physical damage taken becomes a huge problem. After all my attempts to make physical mitigation work, I came to the point that I think it's not worth the effort to make an attack-based Facebreaker build go crit. You need to deal non-reflectable damage instead. And finally I ended up with good old Ancestral Warchief Totems. With Warchief Totems, going Trickster makes no sense, so I reascended to Assassin instead, for the bonus base crit from power charges, and with Ambush, 100% more critical strike chance against enemies on full life, basically makes your totems always crit on the first hit, resulting in a one-shot 90% of the time. Let's get right into the gem setup. Our main skill, Ancestral Warchief Totem, is linked with melee physical damage, melee damage on full life, increased critical strikes, increased area of effect, and faster attacks. As a movement skill, we link Shield Charge, faster attacks, and Fortify, and for cliffs I use Flame Dash. Auras and buffs in use are Discipline for simply more energy shield, and Hatred for bonus DPS. The cold conversion also results in plenty frozen monsters. Vol Discipline and Vol Haste, increased duration, provide temporal bonuses during boss fights. And for power charge generation, I use Ice Spear, Power Charge on Crit, GMP and Spell Echo. For general mapping, this is not really required, as your totems will one-shot most of the monsters with the first 95% crit hit. But versus bosses, the power charges will reduce the duration of the fight significantly. Let's take a quick look at the passive tree. Our keynotes are CI of course, as there's not much life in this area of the tree, but as we are playing a totem build, Ghost Reaver and Volpact are not required this time, and we pick up Ancestral Bond instead, increasing our totem count to 2. Other totem passives we grab are Shamanistic Fury, very efficient nodes on the travel route to the Templar, and Shaman's Dominion for nice 100% global crit after placing a totem, and the juicy 80% crit multi nodes. We pick up all power charges as we are Assassin, together with the Templar and the Witch AoE nodes, and lastly all energy shield clusters in reach. In terms of Ascendancy nodes, Deadly Infusion will simply cap out our crit chance. Ambush, as already mentioned, 100% more crit chance versus enemies on full life, will make our totems always crit on a first hit, as we are at 50% base crit without charges, and that will be enough to kill most packs. So you're not required to keep up power charges during normal mapping. Only for boss fights you should spam that Ice Spear. Talking about boss fights, Culling Strike from Assassinate will come in handy as well. For bandits, kill all in normal and cruel, and help Alira in Merciless for the last missing power charge. The 4 jewel slots in the passive tree are all reserved for unique jewels. First of all, Martial Artistry for additional 15% AoE, while unarmed, pretty much a no-brainer. Next up is Spire of Stone, providing stun immunity for our totems, as you really don't want your totems getting permastunned. And finally, we got 2 energy from within, one at a standard spot right here, and one at a shadow start, converting this life cluster and a 5% from nullification. To compensate for our missing energy shield from our helm slot taken by Abyssus, what brings us to the gear section of this guide. Our 3 core uniques are Facebreaker, Rigwald's Curse and Abyssus of course. These 3 alone will provide 350 critical strike multiplier already. Together with the flat fist from Abyssus and the 7% base crit from Rigwald's, it's just the dream synergy. From there, the only remaining offensive gear pieces are the 2 rings, ideally steel rings, with flat physical damage, accuracy and crafted energy shield from Elrion. For the rest of the gear, try to get as high energy shield as possible together with decent resistances. A nice titanium as a shield, crystal belt and good old Val Regalia. Keep in mind that the Val Regalia requires 4 off colors, so if you're on a budget, a armory S-base would be a lot easier to color, like the unique Atziri Splendor. Lastly, for boots, you can go with standard rare ones with movement speed, energy shield and resistances. But there are also multiple unique options, like Step and Earth, very cost effective ES, Rainbow Strides are probably the low budget's favorite, and I personally use Death's Door, as I'm really in love with bleed immunity. Just try to get your resistances kept at around 10k ES pool shouldn't be hard to achieve. That's like a 700 to 800 ES chest with a 400 ES shield and you're basically fine. For flasks you need a standard freeze, curse and bleed immunity, and I personally really like to have a remove ignite as well, especially with the S jars that cannot leech themselves. Depending on the content you play, you can adjust your composition of resistance and utility flasks. 1 mana flask should be in your setup though, especially in boss fights. When you recast your totems a lot, mana can be an issue. To come to a conclusion, the Warchief Assassin is probably the better use of Rigwald's Curse, as handling Reflect otherwise is almost impossible. You get a build capable of doing all the current endgame content on a reasonable budget with over 10k ES pool and very high DPS. The totem playstyle has to be yours of course, but this laid back style also trivializes plenty otherwise unplayable map mods. My general playstyle advice is always place a totem first before charging on, as you never know what's hidden in the ground, and keep in mind that you're not stun immune, so Vol Discipline and Stibnite Flasks are your friend in sketchy situations. As always, for a link to the passive tree and example gear, check the link to my Guidecompendium in the description below. That's it from my side for today, stay safe and thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a thumbs up, and for more Path of Exile content feel free to subscribe to my channel, where you will find weekly build guides and trading tips. I hope you guys enjoyed and hope to see you next time.